Welcome back to another exciting episode of Adventuring for Mere Mortals. We're on episode number 8 already, and today we're going to be visiting with Beth VanPelt. And if that name sounds familiar, that's because in episode 3 we interviewed her husband. But I can assure you that she is way cooler in terms of the brief discussion that we had before this. And today we're going to be talking about SCUBA. Trev, I'm going to kick it over to you for the introduction.
Cool. Yeah, as Kyle mentioned, that Beth married one of my good friends, Alex. And I first met Beth actually at the weekend of their wedding. I had never met her in person until then. But so, yeah, they got married last summer. So family and I went down to, or I guess up to Lexington or Frankfort, Kentucky to see that. And that was a good time. And yeah, and we really didn't think we were going to get Alex off of our hands. So we're all very appreciative that Beth came along and is, from what I understand, making you very happy. So that's very good. We're all very excited. But a bonus of that is that Beth is actually really cool, as Kyle mentioned. And she is the manager of New Horizons SCUBA in Lexington, Kentucky. And when I found that out, I'm like, oh yeah, we got to get Beth on the podcast. She was one of the first people that popped in my head. So we finally made it happen. So yeah, Beth, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I know when you hear Kentucky, you don't really associate that with anything but like horses and bourbon, but apparently SCUBA is kind of a thing here. So I came here from West Virginia about 6 years ago. I was managing YMCA's aquatics program and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I met the owners of New Horizons SCUBA, and they took me on an awesome adventure of getting certified, going on trips, and just kind of working my way through the scuba adventure, getting dives under my belt. And then, 6 years later, I just passed 300 dives and I'm managing New Horizons SCUBA. So it's very, very exciting. And aside from scuba, I do other, kinds of adventure type of things. I do like to climb with Alex, and I don't know if you talked about it, but I will admit that while I am the better diver, he is the better climber. And we like to go skiing. And my next, hopefully, adventure is going to be learning how to surf. So that's on my bucket list. That's kind of what I want to figure out how to do next.
That's awesome. Yeah, 300 dives. That's insane. I didn't know that before that. That's a great amount of dives. So I'm sure you're going to regale us with all kinds of tales and fun anecdotes about that. But before we get to all of that, let's do a little bit of a catch up. So I actually saw Kyle 2 days ago, weirdly. Yeah, Kyle, how about you start us off?
Been doing some training for hopefully upcoming backpacking trips. We'll see what the fire scene holds and overall weather. But in there, then did a road trip through Idaho, Big Loop, and then Yellowstone Grand Tetons. Took a friend that came into town, showed him around, did a couple hikes in the local area. And then, right now in the Metro St. Louis area, recording in our siblings' basement. And yeah, I'll head back to Boise. So if you're in an airport, you can just say hi to people that look like they might be named Kyle. That'd be fun. But yeah, that's about it for me. What about you, Trev?
Yeah, I've actually been weirdly busy at work, like way too busy for a company that is letting me go. They were supposed to let me go at the end of last month because I'm like remote, and since we moved to Illinois, but they don't know how to quit me, so they extended me for another month. So I'm working on getting extended again, but we'll see what happens with that. But other than that, I've been watching at the end of July anyway. I was watching a lot of RAGBRAI coverage. So if you don't know what RAGBRAI is, it's the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. It's the biggest organized bike ride in the world. Like it's 15 to 20,000 people every year at the end of July. They bike across the state of Iowa, and I'm trying to talk people into getting a crew together to go do it next year. I've already talked to Kyle about it.
Trev's been bit by the cycling bug.
Yeah. I've been cycling a lot lately. So.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep. It's all Stan's fault. But yeah, other than that, along with that, I did my longest bike ride ever 2 weeks ago. And I did about 40 miles, so that was pretty exciting. Yeah, I was happy with that. My bike chain messed up with the last 5 miles, so I was limping home, but I was able to fix it, and I'll get back on the road soon. But yeah, other than that, just been watching, I'm a geology person, so I've been watching YouTube videos of the new Icelandic volcano all the time. I find that so amazingly interesting. It's very nerdy and interesting, but yeah, that's what I've been up to. What about you, Beth?
Well, I got back from a trip to Little Cayman about 2 weeks ago. It was amazing. Just
Nice.
wonderful experience. The best island and dive experience that I've had so far. And then between then and now, I've been prepping for, I'm leading a trip up to Mackinac City on Lake Michigan to dive the Great Lakes. So going from the Caribbean to the Great Lakes in like a 3-week period. Tons of fun. Very, very grateful. Also very exhausted.
So you're going to be diving like shipwrecks and stuff on the lake?
Yeah, the shipwrecks up there are just perfectly preserved. We get to see wooden shipwrecks, which is a huge deal because all the shipwrecks in the ocean are corroding and going away, and there's no wood left. So that's going to be a super cool experience.
That's awesome. Well, I think that leads us very nicely into our main topic, which is, as Kyle mentioned before, scuba and scuba diving. I think they're interchangeable terms, but I'll be very honest, I'm not super knowledgeable about diving, so I'm probably going to take more of a backseat on this episode. I'm going to let Kyle steer. But for people that don't know much about this like me, can you define scuba for us?
So scuba is self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
How does one get into this? It's not like a natural thing. You don't walk out your door and say, I'm going to go spit in the face of nature and carry my own air down underwater. How do you get into this?
Well, for me, I don't know if it's like this with all divers, but I knew I wanted to learn how to scuba dive when I was like 4. I saw these flags at the lake when my dad and mom and I were on the boat. And I asked what the flags meant, and they were diver down flags. And my dad explained that it's when people use something to breathe and they go underwater and see all the underwater fish, and some kind of like fun explanation. And I immediately knew that's what I wanted to do. But even when I was younger, I was a very pragmatic kid, I guess. But I even thought back then, well, I don't know if this is like super attainable to like grow up and be a scuba diver. So I didn't tell a lot of people. But when the chance came for me to actually do it, I absolutely jumped at it. And for me, it was right place, right time, and just a lifelong desire to do it. But for a lot of people, they see documentaries, maybe they go to the ocean and go snorkeling and want to see more. Maybe they want to do something with it, like to help people. So maybe they want to do military, Navy diving, commercial diving. So all sorts of ways to, kind of go about it. But I think once you decide that that's what you want to do, the best course of action is to find a local dive center. So you can find all kinds of stuff on the internet. A lot of it's true. A lot of it's really crazy and not true. So the best way to make sure you're getting the correct information is to go through people that do it. all the time and ask them about the process. Normally it involves, doing like an online thingy. And then you do pool work, classroom work, and then you go out into open water. So for me, it was a lake or a quarry rather. So, kind of dark and spooky. But other places you can go to the ocean and get it finished. And then once you're certified for life. And it just opens up a whole new level of life for you. I mean, every vacation that I go on now, whether it's with Alex doing his cross country things, or if it's a dive vacation, at one point or another during that vacation, I'm going to go diving.
That's awesome. So you got me curious. You mentioned there's things out on the internet that about scuba that aren't true. Now you got to at least throw some of them out there.
Okay, so any kind of media at all. I mean, there are so many misconceptions out there. So the first one that I actually get asked the most, and I never expected this, but almost every time I tell someone I dive, their response is, well, what about sharks? Like that's I mean, like it's been weighing on them their whole lives, like just this, like thinking that a shark's somehow going to get you. So that's the first crazy thing that you see mostly in the media. But sharks are not, in fact, man killers who will hunt you down and, destroy you. I dive with sharks. It's my favorite animal in the whole world. And while you don't want to like chase them down and touch them and, pet them and try to hold them, they're not out to harm you. Normally, when you're diving, they see you as another apex predator, and they're either curious and just kind of hang out like a cat watching what you're doing, or they won't want to be around you. So they'll just kind of leave. Everybody asks me, well, what do you do when you see a shark? And I tell them, you thank your lucky stars that you were able to experience that moment.
Oh, that's cool.
And nothing else.
See, do you dive with a knife so you can take care of the shark if it comes after you?
Oh my goodness. So that's another one of those like kind of humorous things with diving that you kind of see in the media, but it's these people getting onto the boat and it's like they're competing with each other to see whose knife is longer. And I swear, like I've seen people get into a quarry with like a huge knife on their leg, and a quarry that like doesn't have fishing line or any entanglements. We call them big knife boat guys.
And I'm sure most of them are aggro men, probably.
Oh my word. It's pretty fun to watch. All you need a knife for is fishing line if it's an area where there might be fishing line or like an entanglement hazard, but you do not need them to fend off the sharks.
Yeah, I've never run into that, but I also just dive with my friends. So now I kind of want to go and experience this one-upmanship.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to a lot of other outdoor activities. There's always going to be I'll call it the aggro dude that really no one really wants to be friends with. They don't make the experience that fun.
Oh my gosh. I had a guy, clearly did not think I knew what I was talking about because I am, in fact, a woman.
What? Really?
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm a girl. I like feminine stuff most of the time. All right. But this guy, we were at a quarry doing our dive master training, and he was talking down to me pretty much the entire weeks of the class. But on this particular occasion, he kind of pissed me off because I told him something about the visibility being bad, just a heads up. And he's like, oh, well, you're a clear water diver. You don't know about bad visibility. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then just all sorts of remarks like that. And a couple weeks later, we went to the Outer Banks for a wreck diving class. He had this huge helmet, like an unnecessarily huge helmet, and we weren't going deep inside of a shipwreck. We were learning how to run lines and maybe go in a room or two. It's just unnecessary. So I asked, why do you have a helmet? He's like, well, I want to penetrate safely. And I was pretty pretty done with him at that point. So I told him, if your buoyancy wasn't as bad as it is, you wouldn't need a helmet. He did not appreciate that at all. But I will tell you, he came off that dive with a dent in his helmet. I have no idea how, but he did. Yeah.
Oh, karma. Karma's great.
I had buoyancy control issues one time, but I accidentally dropped a weight.
Oh, that's the worst.
And it was like a
There's
balloon.
nothing
It was
you
like
can
an
do.
up. It was just like, where am I going? Okay, now we need to dump air out of the BCD. And then my friends were like, what was that? And I was like, I think I dropped, or I'm not really sure. And then, yep, we had to do a little search for the weight. So
Oh, that's the worst, because you're like, what? Why am I going up? I'm continuing to go up. I can't
Yep.
stop. But I mean, nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So I guess two-part question. I said I was going to shut up, but I'm just still talking, so we'll just roll with it. How many dives have you done, and where's some like highlight cool places you've ever dived?
Yeah, for sure. So I am at 308 now.
Wow.
Big highlights of all of the dive experience that I've had are kind of unusual, I guess. I prefer the dark, spooky kind of diving. I don't know
Yes.
why. It's always just seemed so cool to me, and just I love the bottom of a lake as much as I do the ocean. So one of my favorite lake dives, we went out towards the middle of the lake, and we were going down pretty far. We got to, I'd say it was about 99 feet. And in a lake where you have so much silt and crap floating on the top, once you get down that deep, it's pitch dark. So you have to have a light. It's almost as if you're in a cave, just very, very like dark to the extreme. But on this particular dive, when we turned around and started going back towards shore, we saw the sun like silhouetting perfectly as we were coming up against, there was this underwater forest that we had passed, and like you could see the outline of the trees and stuff like in the glowing light. So even though that was in our local lake that not many people like diving, that was actually one of my favorite dives that I've done. It was just so serene. But
That's awesome.
it was super, super cool. But as far as, places abroad, my favorite dive of all time would have to be in the cenotes in Tulum, Mexico. So the cenotes are these super ancient sinkholes. A lot of them are like open pits, but then there are some that you can, go under. It's considered a cavern dive. It's more cavey than cavern, honestly. But there's one in particular called Angelita. And there's this legend about it in Mayan history, and it's supposedly the gate to the Mayan underworld. And this is just a literal hole, just literal sinkhole. And from the surface, you can't even see the bottom. It's just, this random puddle of water. And as you descend further and further, you come out of like the silt that's at the top of it and just see this huge, like, this huge area open up, and you can see from one end of it to the other, and underneath you is this it's a thick cloud of sulfuric acid from like the leaves and stuff decaying underneath. So once you get to about 90 feet, it's just this super thick cloud that you're over, and it looks solid. It looks like you could just land on it, but it's held up by the salt water coming in from the coastline and going through the underwater caves, and it's meeting the fresh water and just like suspending this acid, sulfuric acid, in the water. So you adjust your buoyancy, breathe out really hard, and you go through this cloud. And when you're going through it, you can't see anything. And it was kind of funny because we all were like holding hands going through it. And our dive guide, who does it every day, was just shaking his head, watching us as we went down, like huddling together. But you come out after, I think it's like 5 feet thick. and it's clear again, and you just see like this super dark, like red tinted, and it genuinely looks like the underworld. And you can kind of go around this big mound of like leaves and stuff like this, and just see like the old trees, and then just this like darkness below you where it gets deeper. And I swear, I really did feel like I was in the Mayan underworld. It was so creepy, but like once in a lifetime. Definitely Google cenote Angelita and see the pictures for yourself. It's absolutely phenomenal. So that was my favorite.
That's awesome. I've actually did field work down around there twice. So I haven't been diving in the caves, but I do have I guess I was just like snorkeling along the top kind of story. But so I can't remember. It wasn't like a big famous cenote. It was on some private property that my advisor, or I guess she's the assistant professor or assistant chair of the department I was a grad student in. We were on some property there, and she's been doing work there for 30 years or something. But we were like snorkeling around this cenote, and we had like our big waterproof spotlights, and the edge of this cenote actually went deep down into a cavern, and I shone my light down, and this was a really strong, like multiple thousand lumen light, and it didn't reach the other side. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to get away from that. Something's going to come out of there and take you out. It was like the most surreal experience I've ever had. And it's obviously a very strong memory for me. And I will remember that for the day. I even tried to go down it again and look again, and it did the same thing twice. I was just like, oh, nope. Okay, this isn't for me. So I don't think I would be a spooky area diver. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be surprised. I was the person that was always weird about like water that I was swimming in where I couldn't see the bottom. I was weird about that for a long time. But then all of a sudden, when I started diving, like it feels like, I know it's down there. I've seen it. I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. If you learn to dive, that might change.
We'll have to push those boundaries.
So Beth, we touched a little bit on how, you would get into diving initially, and that's, locate a local dive shop. But one thing that I learned that I didn't realize until I actually joined up with a dive shop and did, open water and then advanced open water, is that the general course progressions and specialties, and how many different specialties are out there. And that, just whenever you get your certification, you don't get to go and do all the cool stuff. There's a continual education path, I will call it, for what you want to do. And the other thing, for me, I was like, oh, that's going to be super expensive. And so on this show, we talk a lot about, overcoming the hurdles and getting out and, being in that growth mindset of moving forward, and let's learn that. Would you mind touching a little bit on that? Just like some of the specialty things that you can get in, because that's usually what you see in Hollywood. And then like is there assistance out there? Are dive shops getting rich off of this? The instructors, they really have McMansions, that they go home to.
Yeah.
we'll get rid of some of these, myths that are out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will go ahead and tell you from now very personal experience that dive shops are not bringing in bukus of profit. Pretty much anybody that you encounter that has chosen to be in this industry as their career path, it's because they're passionate about it. I always joke around, especially with my staff, where we work in a dive shop and we handle dive gear all day, every day. Like, I feel like if I'm at my retirement, I've just broken even, then I'm good. And for scuba, there's just so much and so many options of, where it's going to take you. So as far as specialties and the different options with that go, if you're interested in the dark and spooky and caverns like I am, then there's a whole pathway that goes from just getting that dive experience down, learning how to dive in low visibility or in the dark, and then you'll do an intro to cavern, and then an intro to cave, see if that's your thing, and then full cave. So something really unique about diving is that it's just you never stop learning and reaching the next level. If you are not into the dark spooky like me, if that's not your jam, there's a whole field of marine ecology classes that can go hand in hand with diving. We hear about the climate and our coral reefs all the time, and divers are the ones, on the front lines with that coral restoration, marine life surveys, and just really bringing an understanding to how the ocean works and how we can make sure that we preserve it. So all kinds of spectrums. And when it comes to the financial part of it, when I was first starting out, it seemed super impossible. Even when I was a kid, I was like, this is a little expensive. But now that I've kind of gone through all of that process, I learned a lot about how to progress into it. You don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to get all your gear all at once. So if you get a really good mask, fin, and snorkel, when you get certified, make sure you get good quality so that it lasts. And that's a few $100s up front, but at the same time, as long as you take care of your stuff, it's I still use some of my gear from my original open water class. And then when it comes to buying the big gear, like your BCD, your regulator, keep in mind that these are life support pieces of equipment, especially your regulator. If your regulator is not functioning, then you are not able to breathe efficiently. So with that kind of stuff, what I did is I saved and bought piece by piece. And when buying new was too high of a cost, I did buy a couple of my pieces from a few of the dive pros I knew. But it was after I got to know them personally and saw how they took care of their equipment, saw their knowledge of the equipment. So when I did buy, my regulator and my BCD, I knew where it was coming from and I knew it was taken care of. And now a few years down the road, I'm upgrading and getting new gear. Some pieces of gear I'm buying new for the first time, which is exciting. And, I haven't gotten rid of my first set of fins and BCD and regulator, but now it becomes my backup gear because you'll learn with SCUBA, it's all about redundancy, having, multiple pieces at some point when you reach that level. So it is doable. I was absolutely broke when I started. But I got in, my local dive shop. I made those connections. I asked, for advice. I took the advice very seriously. And eventually I got full set of equipment. And now I'm starting to accumulate second pieces of the gear as well.
I want to second that it's really important to get in touch with people who have experience and dive because one of the things that I absolutely love whenever I go out with folks is you get to try different gear and find out what works for you. So Beth's been mentioning BCD. That's short for buoyancy control device. It's like the vest that you wear. You can think of it as an inflatable life jacket. You can control your buoyancy. But what works for one person doesn't really work for another. Like I prefer the vest type, but my friends will prefer on the back, the bladder on their back, and it's just weird for me. But that's a big thing is if you do actually choose to pursue this, you don't have to buy it all at once and you'll get to test it. That's a big thing. And the other thing is you might think that you're getting a really good deal online whenever you're looking for different things, but it's really important, as Beth said, they're not making a lot of money, or profit off of this. Please support your local dive shop, because even if you get gear offline, you're going to have to go to them to have it set up and inspected and reviewed. kind of like whitewater rafting, this isn't something that you're just going to jump into. You need a trusted partner, and you're going to find that at the local dive shop.
Yeah.
So I just want to
Yeah,
put that
I've
plug in there.
seen. Yeah, I always when it comes to our students coming in and getting their gear for the first time, or maybe people getting their first total diving system for the first time, I always advise them, even if you just really don't want to buy it from us for some reason, please go to an in-person local dive shop. I've seen so many pieces of gear come into our shop from offline and it's not working. It wasn't the correct thing. It doesn't fit. And with scuba, it's not it's not like a bargain shopping type of sport where you're looking for the cheapest thing possible. This is literally keeping you alive underwater. And if you invest up front and get very, very good quality gear from reputable companies, then you won't have to replace it until 20 years later. I've seen people come in with really old Daycor stuff. And for divers, if you're a diver, you'll know that Daycor was like one of the very first companies. Super, super old company. We still have people bringing stuff in that still works. And it's just incredible. But if you invest properly up front, then it will last you forever.
So for someone that may not be able to, I guess they're not sure if they want to invest yet because they're not sure if they want to really get into like deep into scuba, are there like rental programs or things like that with the local dive shops?
Yes. Dive shops, pretty much all dive shops that like sell gear will rent gear as well. And when you're renting gear, some things that I would like encourage you to do is make sure you try it on in the store first. And before you take a regulator away from a store as a rental, I would ask them to hook it up to a cylinder and turn the cylinder on, make sure it's breathing well, make sure it's not leaking anywhere. Especially rental gear, it goes through the ringer and it needs to be serviced a couple times a year to stay in good shape. And not every dive shop invests that time or knows or realizes that they need to be doing that. So if you rent gear, it's great. We have some divers that only rent gear. They don't own it. But make sure you're doing it from people that you trust.
Fair enough. So I know Kyle offhandedly mentioned like all the steps and classes that you can go through. What's the beginner? Like what's the intro? The Scuba 101, if you will. Like what's that? What kind of class should people be looking for if they're looking to get into this?
Yeah, it's named a different thing with different agencies. With Patty, it's a Discover Scuba. With SSI, it's a Try Scuba. But basically, it's between an hour and 2 hours with an instructor, learning the very, very basics of how to have scuba gear on in the water safely. And then they'll put you in a pool. They'll normally have it between 5 and 7 feet. And they'll teach you the very basic skills like clearing your mask and taking your regulator out and putting it back in. And then they'll let you learn, how to swim in scuba gear and try it out, breathe on the regulator, really just have fun and see if it's something that you like. It helps, especially if people are really apprehensive about the class. We'll put them in a Try Scuba and it puts you a lot more at ease because a lot of the misconceptions out there are just not true. And you find that out as soon as you breathe on a regulator and go out of underwater.
It's very strange.
Yes.
And don't be scared of trying it in a pool. Actually, the best piece of advice that I received was spend more time in the pool than you actually do out in open water or doing anything like that. Because once you fine tune your buoyancy and that is maintaining your level within the water with your breath, it makes diving anywhere so much easier. And I actually have a fun story about my open water pool thing. So I was just practicing buoyancy and, you're hanging out and trying to maintain a certain level. It gets boring. So I started looking at the bottom of the pool, and I found a diamond that had come out of someone's ring. I picked it up
Wow.
and I turned it in. And yes, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's not a real diamond. That's not a real diamond." And then
It's
so the
just
next time we
huge.
went through, yeah, you can find all sorts of cool stuff on the bottom of pools, and not even in the deep end.
Awesome.
Like, so
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, I agree with that though. When I first started out, the owner of the dive shop would come and help me clean the pool that I managed. And he would have me in gear with him. It was after I was certified. He would take my fins off, and I would have to hover just above the bottom while I was sweeping up all of the junk in the bottom of the pool. Long story, it was in bad shape. But I feel like that just shaped my buoyancy more than anything. It's like any other sport, you just practice. And I think that's another misconception, is that you'll get in the water with scuba gear and just swim around and know exactly what to do and how to be where you want in the water. And it's just not true. It takes so much practice to just really, really square that away if you want to. And some people, some people just want to do the couple times a year scuba, and that's fine too. But when you want to, kind of go up to the next level, when you want to, maybe go on the professional path, learning that buoyancy is key. And the way you do it is just do it over and over and over again.
Before we started, I was sharing with Beth my experience with buoyancy control the first couple times, and my friends described me as a potato bug in the water, and then the wavy arm man. Except not with wavy arms. It was bad. It was bad. But you know what? We all had a good laugh. They won't let me live it down. And
that's what. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and you know what? There was motivation for improvement, and every time
There
we
you
go
go.
now, it's always, well, you're doing so much better now.
I love the wacky, wavy, inflatable arm man reference, because so I dive a dry suit as well, and with a dry suit, instead of the water coming in and heating up, there are seals on your neck and wrists, and it's just completely dry, like dry suit. And you use a button to make air go into it to control your buoyancy, which is great. But now you have a little air bubble like inside your entire suit that moves around, depending on how your body is. So my very first open water dry suit dive, it was my training dive. I was going along, following, and all of a sudden I like went forward too much, and the air went into my feet. And the feet your boots don't have like a dump on it, so the air's just there unless you can get turned the right way to hold your valve, facing up. So I did not, in fact, get the bubble moved because my boots were a little too big, unbeknownst to me, and my foot came out of the foot pocket. So there was nothing that I could do at that point, and I was just going up and up from like 40 feet. And I came out of the water feet first. I was very mad at myself. And my buddies that saw me like come up to the top of the water said that like my fins flew up in the air and then just deflated. So yeah, buoyancy's hard and it takes a lot of practice. I was fine after that. I didn't go up too fast. But yeah, you got to be able to laugh at yourself afterwards.
Oh, here's a question for you, Beth. And I've actually heard this more and more from folks. And that is, do you have to be good at math and physics in order to be a diver? Like, did you need to get A's in college, or, is this something that you can actually learn and, apply to diving without, having to have, been good at it in school?
Well, my degree is in music, so obviously I was not prepped for all of this in college. But I would say no. You need to have a basic understanding that air compresses as you go down in the water and expands as you come up. That's pretty much the whole entire shebang. But especially as a recreational diver, you just have to know the very, very basics that you experience like in life every day with physics. If you want to go down the professional path, it does take a little bit more knowledge of the physics and the physiology of a person underwater. But I will say, you know, I became an instructor last year. It's been awesome. And I'm not super inclined towards physics and math and all of that. It is one of my weakest spots. But I did apply myself and asked for help, and I was able to pass the exams. I shed 3 or 4 tears during the physics portion, but I did it, and I know it now. But that is not something that I have a natural like aptitude for. So if you don't have an aptitude for it, that is fine. You can do it. Just practice.
So like we try to talk a little bit about sometimes like what type of people are normally doing this sport. So I'm not super familiar with them. So what does the stereotypical scuba diver look like?
I would say up until, I mean, even 5 years ago, it was just this middle-aged white dude is like the stereotype of a diver.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty in the dive industry. But scuba is open to so many more people now. A lot of it's because there's been a lot of research and a lot of advancement in the industry over the years just to make it more accessible to, you know, a person who's not in the military or not, you know, a commercial diver. So I would say now it's still a lot of middle-aged white dudes, but the millennial generation's really getting into it. And women in particular are making huge advances in the dive industry. So it really wasn't that long ago that women instructors weren't a thing. So the first one of the first women scuba instructors, Sylvia Earle, is still alive today. And still very active in the industry, just to put it into perspective. So I would say women are diving more and more, but we are still definitely the minority when it comes to the professional world of scuba.
So a book that I recommend that everyone reads is Into the Planet.
Yes.
Which is amazing. And it is about a cave diver, a science diver. That's where I want to take my diving career, is into science diving and something applied in that capacity. But Jill is, you know, that's her jam. She started diving. She became an instructor. She ran a dive school, and then, you know, got all these specialties, and now she's National Geographic photographer, everything. The book is amazing. So it's Into the Planet. It'll make you want to dive.
Yeah. Well, and she wasn't just the first woman to do this. She was the first person to dive inside of an iceberg ever.
Wow.
Yeah. She's amazing and one of my scuba icons.
While you're talking about scuba mentors, icons, are there other ones that you really aspire to be towards being?
So my favorite dive buddy that I dive with consistently, his name is Drew, and he took me under his wing really, really early on when I was a diver, because I had just moved to Kentucky. I didn't know anybody, no friends, no family. So I got plugged into the dive shop and basically just befriended a lot of the pros in the shop. And I was like, hey, I have a lot to learn. Will you please take me diving? And they all did. And Drew, especially throughout the years on our dives, I learned something every time I dive with him. Just a ton of scuba wisdom. There's another dive pro named Carrie. He's a cave diver and just one of the nicest people you could ever meet. And dives with him are always amazing because they're long dives. My longest dive with him was like an hour and 15 minutes. It was crazy. But he has shown me a lot about like being calm, being super squared away in the water, and going slow. So both of those have had a huge impact on my life, as well as the owners of the dive shop, Travis and Levon. They did so much to propel me through scuba throughout the years. Like, I'm forever grateful for what they did, just getting me into the industry and just like kind of lining out that path. So most of my icons are people that I still see that are involved in my shop. And I just think they're the coolest people in the world.
So we were talking about how, like, the stereotypical diver, and since you're now an instructor, you're one of the ways we can get more people into diving that wouldn't typically do it, because you get to be that person that's like, oh wow, I can do this too. See, she's doing it. So what are some other ways we can do that other than just be like the shining light of, hey, I can do that too type of thing?
I think it was Patty that started Women's Dive Day. It happens every year, and I cannot remember if it's June 16th, 17th, or 18th, but it is somewhere around there. Nope, July 16th, 17th, or 18th. So that's a huge event. It's celebrated worldwide now, where women everywhere just gather and dive together. Something else really cool that's happening, especially now that social media is such a huge thing, is that huge Facebook groups are being formed. I'm part of a Facebook group called SCUBA Women. And it's so refreshing to just have a forum with like the women's perspective, because guys, like, some things logistically for us are a little bit different. Just all around, especially like on a boat with a bathroom situation, like in a dry suit, there's a whole thing with that. So it's just good to like be in that women only zone. We love our male dive buddies. We do, but we do face some unique challenges. So social media is really, really mobilizing women and getting them at these events, making sure that we have a voice in the industry. So I'm super excited. The company that merged with New Horizons Diving, Dive Ventures. So technically we're New Horizons and Dive Ventures Lexington right now. But Dive Ventures has 13 stores across the country. And I'm very, very happy and proud to say that over 50% of our leadership team are women. So that's a super, super cool thing to be a part of. Yeah. And we're able to see live as the industry starts to change.
That's great. I just love that. That's
yeah.
So you mentioned just logistically how diving can be different for women. Is there equipment or like dive suits that are specifically designed for women, or you just have to, or is it just like the one shape fits all type of
so
situation?
the industry is getting better about it, I will say. There are a ton of BCs or BCDs, the buoyancy compensator. There are a ton of those that are specifically designed for women. A regulator is a regulator, although there are several on the market that are like smaller than, a lot of their counterparts. I would say where the dive industry product-wise needs to catch up is wetsuits. For a very long time, the industry produced a men's wetsuit with a chest. However, that does not work. That's not how this works at all. So product-wise, the industry is catching up. And some of the ways that we kind of have to adapt is there are a few companies out there that are doing custom wetsuits. That really helps. I know one of the companies that we have in the shop is a Bear, and they actually have an entire female design team for their wetsuits. So the dive industry is catching up with those logistical challenges, but they're not quite there yet. One logistical challenge in particular has to do with a dry suit, and dry suits have a P valve on them. And for a guy, like, it was originally designed just for a guy. It's like a condom catheter, that you use, and then you can go while you're diving, and then you empty it later. However, for women, it is a very special logistical challenge that includes a lot of tape. So that's one of those instances where I hope that the industry figures something else out.
Yeah, it sounds like it's needed. Definitely needed.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time for my question I ask everybody. So this doesn't have to be diving or scuba related, but I like to ask everybody, what is your biggest outdoor mistake that you've ever made?
Well, I haven't really had any super close calls, thankfully. But probably my stupidest mistake that I've made, and it's one that I've learned from, is it happened at one of the local quarries. And I turned my air on. My whole kit was put together. I tested every component of my equipment like I'm supposed to. But then I knew, oh, it's going to be like 2 hours until I actually dive. So I turned the air off. But there was still air in the lines and it was pressurized. So fast forward to a couple hours later, I get in the water. We're kind of in a hurry, which, biggest piece of advice, do not be in a hurry to dive ever. But we were in a hurry and we should not have been. And I put my regulator in my mouth. I took one breath and air came out. So, okay, cool. Let's start descending. So I take a breath out. I'm super relaxed. I get to around 8 feet and then I go to breathe in and there is no air. And I did not check my kit again. Thankfully, I was at 8 feet. I did a very safe ascent to the surface while breathing out. And I was very embarrassed, but I had my dive buddy turn my air on. But that did teach me to meticulously check equipment every single time and to not just take one breath and assume that it's on. So thankfully, it did not turn into anything bad except a fun story, but could have been worse. Also, the funniest mistake was I started descending with I thought it was my regulator in my mouth. I got underwater and took a huge breath, and it was my snorkel and not my regulator.
Oh,
Someone was looking me in the eye as I was descending, and I was wondering why they were smiling at me. And that's why. Yeah. Yep. That is unpleasant.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Oh. But I just realized one more thing. So you've done a lot of dives. Are there any like bucket list dives that are on your list?
Yes. So many. My biggest bucket list dive is Truck Lagoon. It is in Micronesia, and it's one of those massive shipwreck sites. It is still a war grave, so you have to be very, very respectful. But it is very quickly deteriorating. And while scientists are trying to stop the rapid deterioration, it will probably be gone in 20 years. So that's one that I want to hit up. I would like to dive between the tectonic plates in Iceland. Definitely on my list.
yep.
And I wrote in my childhood diary when I was really, really young that on my bucket list was the Great Barrier Reef and learning to scuba dive there. So I would like to go and dive the Great Barrier Reef.
These all sound like great places.
So little time. There's a comprehensive list of more, but those are my top ones.
No, that's good. Yeah. Kyle, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't. Thanks for coming on, Beth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sure. Thanks
Let's
for
go
having
blow.
me.
Yeah, let's go blow bubbles soon.
Yes, you have to come on a trip. Also, you mentioned that you missed Belize when you learned to dive. I'm leading a trip to Belize in the summer.
Ooh, I'm still pissed about that. So for listenership, with my friends, I was supposed to go on a diving trip with them. We were planning in Belize. One of the group members was tasked with inviting me. They never actually invited me. They went on the trip. And they were like, and then they were giving me crap about, well, you should have come. It was awesome and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, we started talking about it, and then it just like it went radio silent. And then they turned to Dwayne. And they go, "Did you invite him?" And he goes, "Yeah." Like, no, you didn't. Maybe. So, yeah, they had a great
We'll make
dive
up
trip down
for
there. Yeah. So, yeah, I want to give a shout out actually to that crew. So it's Scuba Connection in Carlsbad, New Mexico. The owners are Robert and Ellen Troutner. Rob goes by Foz because he looks like Fozzie Bear. They have very small class sizes you can imagine in the desert. There's a very active diving community. But yep. So I want to give them a shout out because everything that I know comes from them. So thank you guys, and we all look like brothers.
Okay, well, yeah, and absolutely. Thank you for coming on, Beth. You really kind of schooled us. I learned a lot because I don't know much about scuba, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of information that people get out of this. But yeah, is there anything you want to plug? Your social media, anything like that?
Sure. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm not super active. I'm not an influencer, for sure not. But it's Carolyn Bethus, CarolynBefus. So I post diving and climbing and just my cat and dog. Oh, and husband. I do post him too.
Every once in a while.
Ooh, that's another time where
Yeah, no, but follow our my dive shop on Insta at New Horizons Scuba, or on Facebook at this one was different. Oh, Dive New Horizons. It's get them confused. But Dive New Horizons is our Facebook. And if you want to learn to scuba, we have Dive Ventures has shops in 13 different locations. So just Google diveventures.com, see what we're all about. I'm very, very happy to be with a company like Dive Ventures, and they do swim, travel, scuba. They're big into conservation. So go check them out. We're pretty excited about the future of the dive industry for sure.
Absolutely, and I'll include all that stuff in the show notes so people can just click and go. But yeah, as some like more cleanup notes on the podcast side, still working on a logo. If you're an artist and you want to design our logo, reach out. You can follow me on Instagram, Trevor at Trevor Bowman, 2 L's, 2 N's. Kyle still doesn't have social media, so keep waving at people named Kyle in airports soon,
just
or
anywhere.
in Boise. just wave at people. Just be friendly. Say, "Are you Kyle?" No. You can email the podcast at adventuringformeremortals@gmail.com. Or the podcast Instagram is at meremortalpod. We have a Discord. The link for that's in the show notes. And we got a couple more ratings, but no reviews yet. So as soon as we get a review, I'll read that online. Yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. So till next time, we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.